Cuck stared at herself in the mirror, her emerald eyes filled with fear and determination. The burden of her upcoming 30th birthday weighs heavily on her shoulders, like a time bomb that threatens to destroy everything. She had worked so hard to achieve it, like Zethian. The woman, Kara, knew all too well the cruel fate that awaited her. If she failed to conceive a child before reaching the age of 30, it was a biological imperative, a twisted evolutionary one that ensured the survival of her species at the cost of countless lives. She had always been a career-driven woman who rose through the ranks of the Galactic Patrol with a fierce dedication that left little room for personal relationships, but now, with days to go until her birthday, Kara realizes the cost of her ambition. "I can't let it end like this," she whimpered with her fingers gripping the edge of the sink. "I don't want a plan." It was a desperate game that depended on finding a partner willing to help her get pregnant. She knew it was a long shot, but she had no choice. Time was running out, and she refused to go gently into this good night. Taking one last look at her reflection, Kara straightened her uniform and walked out of her quarters. Her boots clicked against the metal floor of the starship Orion's Fury. She went to the bridge, where Jack's Ironheart was standing behind the wheel. His durable features, illuminated by the glow of this view screen, Commander Terror, welcomed her crisp and professional voice. "I have to talk to you privately." Jax turned his piercing blue eyes. "Of course, my lieutenant had 5 minutes to prepare the room." Kara nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. Jax is a human, a species known for its adaptability and resourcefulness. If anyone could help her, it was him, and she went to the preparation room, thinking about what she wanted to say at this moment. She had practiced 1,000 times, but now that it was here, she felt a twinge of doubt. The door opened, and Jack sat down behind the desk, looking curious. "What can I do for you?" Lieutenant Carla took a deep breath and secretly prepared for the next conversation. "Commander, I need your help with a personal matter. It's a matter of life and death." Jax leans forward, frowning as he continues. "I'm a Zethian, sir, and if I don't have a baby by my 30th birthday next week, I'm going to die." These words are hanging in the air. Heavy and lively, Jack's eyes wide open, mouth and shocked. "I know it sounds crazy." Kara's voice continued to shake, but it was a biological requirement of my species. I was focused on my career and hadn't thought about the consequences. Now I do not have time to recline in his chair, which is elusive. "That's a lot to take in, Lieutenant. I'm not sure how I can help you." Kara felt her heart ache, but she refused to give up. "I need a mate, sir. Someone offered to help me get pregnant." I knew I was asking a lot, but I had no other choice. Jax was silent for a long moment, staring off into the distance. Finally, he said, his voice soft, "I'm sorry, Kara, I can't be that person for you, it's too much too fast. We barely know each other." Kara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. She knew it was a possibility, but hearing those words still hurt. "I understand, sir. Thank you for listening." She turned to shrug, but before she reached the door, Jack told her to wait. "I might not help you, but I will. His name is Rykk Torren. If Jake trusts this empire, she will find where he can find his console and remove the store card in Fury on the outside of the trade pole. I will send you the coordinates." The Tsar nodded with my head, ended the end, and made him satisfied. "Thank you, the commander." I will not forget that. Jack stood by hand, stretching luck, Lieutenant, and being careful. The outer circle can be a dangerous place. Kara held his hand with a smile on her face. "I can handle it, sir, but thank you for your concern," and finally nodded. Kara walked out of the preparation room, her pace quickened, and she headed for the hangar. Now she has a mission, and when she steps aboard her sleek black fighter, that mission goes beyond her patrol duties. Kara felt a rush of adrenaline. She had faced countless dangers in her career, but there was none like this, but she was willing to fight for her life, willing to do anything to survive. The stars faded into streaks of light as Kara entered hyperspace, her destination locked in the fury that awaited and with it the hope of redemption, but even as she hurtled through the void, the assassin knew that her journey had only just begun. The Outer Rim is a lawless place, a safe haven for the galaxy's most dangerous criminals and outlaws, and somewhere in between, Rykk Torren is waiting for the man who holds the key to her survival. Kara just hopes that he will help her understand the desperate nature of her situation because she is a fighter. A warrior through and through, she won't give up without a fight, especially when Kara closes her eyes, her thoughts turn to the future, and her survival hangs in the balance. She hopes to have a future where the child can call himself. This is the future worth winning by risking all adventures and matches. She will do this until her last breath, until the very fabric of the universe crumbles around her. For she is Zethian, the proud daughter of Zeth Prime, and the fire of her people burns bright within her, a fire that cannot be extinguished by time, fate, or anything else. Across the vast expanse of the galaxy, the neon-lit streets pulsed in a wondrous fairy of frenzied energy, a cacophony of sound and color that assaulted Kara's senses as she navigated the crowded entrances, and the trading station a melting pot of other species. Somewhere on the side of the galaxy where anything could be bought or sold for the right price, Kara had her hand on the hilt of her blaster, her eyes scanning the crowd for signs of trouble. She had been to places like this before, but never with so much at stake. She made her way to Say's bar on the edge of the spaceport, according to Jax's information. This is where she wanted to find Rykk Torren. The man who could have been her savior hit a wall of sound and smoke as she walked through the door of the car. The bar was packed with a huge variety of clients, from grizzled liners to svelte corporate types. Kara walked through the crowd, her eyes searching for the man she was looking for, and then she saw him alone, sitting at the table behind her, holding a glass of amber liquid. He was tall and thin, with silver hair and a face that looked like it was carved from granite, as were his eyes. Kara felt a shiver run down her spine as the stark blue of the room met hers. She walked over to his desk. Her heart thumped in her chest. Rykk Torren, and he nodded, his expression aloof from the one asking. "My name is Caliph Wax. I'm Commander Ironheart of the Galactic Patrol, and I was sent here at the mention of Jax's name." Rykk's eyes narrowed. "What does the kind commander want from me?" Kara took a deep breath and secretly prepared for the next conversation. "He said you owed him a favor, and I needed your help." Rykk leaned back to the chair, and his eyes appreciated the expression of my Zethian to help him, surprising and incredibly mixed. "You want my dad?" Your child wakes up with cheeks and blushes. "I know there's a lot to ask, but I have no choice. Jax said you are a man of honor and someone you can trust." Rykk was silent for a long time. His eyes were distant. He finally spoke in a low voice. "I'm not sure if I'm the right man for the job, honey. I'm a mercenary, not a family man." Kara felt her heart sink, but she refused to give. "In my opinion, don't ask for commitment. Just your help in conceding. After that, you can walk away, no strings attached." Rykk /S, eyes met, hers and Kara's saw a flicker of something in their depths, compassion, perhaps, or understanding. "All right," he said, at last, "and I'll help you, but on one condition." Kara's heart leaped with hope. "I have to finish my work. High stakes first, Muffin Organ Fortress heist. I could use your skills and your patrol connections to help me out. Pull it off, and I'll give you what you need." Kara hesitated, thinking that robbing a motorcycle base would be no easy task. Insectoid warriors were known for their brutality and advanced technology, but what choice did she have? She said it in a calm voice. When we started laughing again, and now in the weak light of the bar, we blinked white teeth. He removed him from the bar, and at night the neon light marked the color of the kaleidoscope in his forged properties. Kara's heart pounded with fear and anticipation. They made their way to an unusual little ship on the outskirts of the spaceport empire, punched in their code, and the hatch slid open, hissing onto the deck of the Shadow Eagle. He gestured for Kara to come in. She may not have looked too expensive, but she was important to something. Kara entered her eyes, and her eyes widened as she looked at the array of weapons and technology lined up on the wall. It was no ordinary ship, but one built for war, and it was impressive. She said she was running her fingers along the edge of the plasma cannon. Of course, you come prepared. Rykk laughed, a low rumble that sent shivers down Carla's spine, who was working just like me. You need to be the cat's organ. Don't stroll around. He led her to the cabin. Kara studied it, thinking of a plan of attack. The organ has a weak spot, she said, pointing to a small, unguarded vent on the map. Their exoskeletons are easily affected by high-frequency sound waves. If we can find a jammer in the fortress, we can take them out without a shot. Lake nodded, his eyes shining. I agree with you, dear, but getting in is not easy. The KX agency has a state-of-the-art security system with motion, sensors, and heat detectors. Kara smiled a wild, predatory grin. Leave it to me. I have a few tricks up my sleeve to keep the plans in place and the new partnership building. The fake war and Rykk begin their mission. The stakes were high, and the odds were not in their favor, but Kara was a warrior through and through, and with the Empire at her side, as the Shadowhawk soared into the sky and a blur of stars appeared, she felt invincible and ready to challenge the Milky Way itself. In the light, Kara felt a glimmer of hope for her child's future. She longed and wanted something more, something she had never dared to dream of before the partnership, a connection, a bond beyond the physical, because in Leo and Kara, she found more than just a means to an end. She finds a kindred spirit, a man who understands the fire that burns within her, and together they face the dangers ahead, united in their pursuit of survival, justice, and something more precious than either of them could ever know. Kogan's fortress appeared before them, a monolith of black metal and pulsating green light, and Kara felt a shiver run down her spine as she looked at it. The weight of their mission, pressing down on her like a physical force beside her Rykk, was a coiled spring of energy. His eyes narrowed in concentration as he piloted the Shadowhawk through the asteroid field that surrounded the stronghold. His hands moved over the controls, and with a fluid grace guiding the ship with a skill born of years of experience, were coming up on the entry point. He said his voice was low and concentrated, and the war nodded and tightly grabbed the adhesion of the blasting unit. She used to be in danger, but she never had that danger. The stakes have never been higher. Shadow Eagle slipped through a narrow gap in the fortress's defenses, its cloaking device rendering it invisible to Koth's organ sensors. The Empire steered the ship to a small, unguarded airlock, the hatch following hydraulics slid back with a hiss. Let's go, he said, drawing his gun. We didn't spend much time together. They darted through the dark corridors, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence, Kara's heart pounding in her chest, her senses sharpened to a razor's edge, and then nothing came out. A group of KX machine soldiers emerged from the shadows, their exoskeletons glowing. In the dim light, they fired a hail of plasma balls that hissed through the air. Kara replied, instinctively seeking cover behind the bulkhead. She returned fire, her blaster spitting bolts of fiery energy at the advancing KX bodies. Beside her Empire, a blur of movement, his own weapon, was burning as he felled the insect warriors with ruthless efficiency. His face was full of concentration, and his eyes were steady and focused. We must move on, he shouted across the battlefield. The control room is just ahead. Kara nodded her breath, coming in ragged gases. She plucked up her courage and leapt out of cover, charging forward in a fierce battle cry. Together, they fought their way through the Kexorgon defenses. As their weapons flashed in the darkness, she felt adrenaline rush through her veins, the fierce joy that came from facing death and winning. Finally, they reached the control room. The doors slid open to reveal a large chamber filled with pulsing consoles and flashing hollow screens in the center of the room. A huge Korgan warrior stood guard, his exoskeleton sheathed in weapons. I'll deal with it, one Rykk said, his voice. Makeup enters the console and uploads the virus. The war was hesitant. Her gaze flickered between Rykk and the Korgan warrior. She didn't want to leave him and didn't want to leave him to face the creature alone, but she knew he was right. The mission came first, and they were running out of time with one last, desperate look. Kara sprinted with the console, and her fingers uploaded her fingers to the key as she uploaded the virus that could disable her powerful defense. She could hear the voice of the match, as a metal conflict on a metal when Rykk fights with Sorgan Warrior, and then cry with the last victory. It was over, the virus uploaded, the defenses collapsed, and Korgan's soldier lay dead at Rykk's feet. Carrara buried her heart in her throat and saw Rykk standing there, his armor sweaty and bruised, but his eyes alive with triumph. "We did it," he said. His voice was raw from exhaustion. "This fortress is ours." Kara felt a rush of emotions, a mixture of relief and gratitude, and something deeper, something she couldn't quite name. She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and wrapped her arms around Rykk, holding him tight. After a moment, they stood there. The 2 warriors were united in victory, their hearts pounding, and then Lake slowly looked away, searching for his Kara. He spoke quietly, but before he could finish, a new sound filled the air, a loud screech that made Kara grit her teeth. Her eyes widened in horror as a new wave of Kogan warriors poured into the room, weapons raised. "We have to go," she said urgently. Rykk nodded. They rushed towards the door with grim faces, weapons glinting in their hands, fighting their way through KCK agencies that crashed out of the fortress and into the asteroid field. Except for Shadowhawk, who was waiting for them like a beacon of hope, they jumped onto the hatch and slammed it shut behind them as the Empire fired up its engines and launched the ship into the void. As the fortress retreated behind them, Kara felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her as the adrenaline of the fight wore off. She threw herself into the co-pilot seat, eyes closed, but even as she passed out, she felt a warm hand on her shoulder, a gentle touch that spoke of comfort and care. "Rest now," Rykk said in his voice. "Soft, you've earned it," so the stars and stripes outside the window and the man. She had come to trust his presence. Kara let herself fall into a dreamless sleep, confident that at least they were safe now, but even as she slept, she knew their journey was far from over. The Kex agency will not take this defeat lightly. There is still a fight to be had and danger to contend with, and then there is the matter of her own fate, the ticking clock hanging over her like an upside-down sword of Damocles. She had come to Rykk for help and a chance to save her life, but now, as she lay in the silence of the Shadowhawk's cockpit, Kara realized that her feelings for the mercenary had grown deeper and deeper. Just thanks or friendship. She began to take care of him and trust him with her life and inner heart. In addition, Kula woke up for the most expensive things they know than both of them. The soft bustle of the Shadow Eagle's motor and the soft vibration of the boat gradually disappeared, and she returned to waking. She blinked, adjusted the cab-illuminated light, and then sat next to her. His eyes were focused on the stars outside the window. "How long have I been out?" she asked in a rough and sleepy voice, and she looked up at him with a smile on her face. "For a few hours. You needed the rest of the war." She walked with her head and stretched her hand. Above her head, when she moved, the task disappeared. "Where are we headed?" she asked, leaning forward to study the navigation computer a little bit. "I know that," Rykk said. His voice was hidden somewhere, "and we could reduce the reorganization for a while." Our next step raised Sar's eyebrows with curiosity. The stars coalesce in pinnacles of light against the inky blackness of space before them. A small, unassuming planet hung in the void on its surface. Empire here welcomes the combination of green and blue modeling and says the boat is diverted to the atmosphere of the Earth. Outside my house, they landed on the Tsar and saw big hills and green forests. Picturesque small villages adorn the landscape. It's a far cry from the neon-lit streets of Fifua Prime, or the cold, sterile corridors of Galactic Patrol. The Imperial starship landed the Shadow Eagle on a small, isolated landing pad, and the ship dropped into its landing gear. He shut off the engine with a gentle thud and turned around with a serious expression. "Before we go any further," he whispers, "I have something to tell you." Kara felt worried but nodded and waited for him to continue. "I have thought about your situation," Rykk said, his eyes focused on what you asked me to do. Kara's heart skipped a beat, her mouth suddenly went dry, and Rykk took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "I want to do it. I want to help you get pregnant." Kara felt a mixture of excitement, relief, and gratitude, as well as something deeper, something she couldn't name. She opened her mouth to speak, but Lake raised his hand. "Stop him, but I have a condition," he said in my voice. "I want to be part of a child's life." "I'll do two for you." Kara's eyes widened, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never thought of that, and she had never dared to expect that the Empire would possess such a precious thing. She said, her voice shakes. "I don't know what to say." He smiled a gentle smile that made her hurt. "Yes," and then, with tears in her eyes and a hopeful heart, Carrara nodded with his voice, hardly whispering. "Yes." They got out of the Shadow Eagle and went to a comfortable cabin in the woods. The fire crackled in, casting a warm golden light into the room. His touch was gentle and reverent, and in the soft light of the fire they came together, their bodies moving in perfect sync, their hearts beating together, a pure, blissful moment, a connection and intimacy Kara had never known before moments, and her heart mourned. She knew she had found something of value, something worth fighting for, to spend her days in Kara and Rykk's happiness and contentment, exploring the beauty of each other's manhood. As they hiked through forests, swam in clear lakes, and made love under the stars, their passion and devotion grew over time, but even as they reveled in their new love, Kara knew their time together was limited. Her birthday was approaching, and with the deadline hanging over her head like a sentence, she tried not to think. It tried to lose itself in the joy of the current moment, but when the days marked, fear and uncertainty began to crawl in a cold groan-blown whisper at the back of her mind, and then on her 30th birthday. The Tsar woke up to a strange, unfamiliar sensation in her stomach, sitting in her hand, pressing her stomach, and feeling a flicker, a tiny, expensive spark of life. She whispered about emotional anxiety. He gathered in their hands and embraced the laughter with tears of relief. "We did it," he said in an emotional voice. "We must become parents." And as the sun rose over the men's hills here and the future stretched before them like a bright trail, Carrara knew she had found something worth living for. In fighting for him, she found love and used it to face the challenges ahead, and as she lay in Ray's arms, the child they grew inside of her, Kara knew she was ready for whatever the universe threw at her because she was a warrior through and through, with the Empire at her side and their children in her lap. She knows she can face anything and overcome any obstacle, so together, with hearts full of love and eyes full of hope, Kara and Rykk set out to face the future, ready to face the galaxy and all its wonders. One day at a time. A year later, Kara was awakened from her sleep by the soft cries of her young son. She rolled over her hand and instinctively reached for Rykk, only to find his side of the bed empty. She sat up with a smile and pursed her lips as she heard his deep, soothing voice. Kara came out of the nursery and into the room, leaning against the door frame as she watched as Rykk held their son, the planet named after the planet they had found solace on, and was glad she was sleeping with trembling sides. The man, Rykker, had his fingers clenched. It was a small hug. "You were up early trying to catch the sunrise like the old man." Kara giggled, gently catching Rex's attention. His eyes met hers. A mischievous light dances in their depths. "Well, look what it is." Finally, he woke up and teased himself in a low and seductive voice. "You know I need beauty sleep." She purred as she ran her hand down his muscular arm, especially after the news we got last night. Rykk's smile widened, and his free arm wrapped around her waist and pulled her close, Kay's organs scattering to the wind. The combined patrol and resistance force defeated. The weight is lifted. Kara hummed in agreement as she ran her fingers over his hard chest. "This is a new beginning," she whispered, eyes locked with his, "about the galaxy and about us," and Rykk's hand slipped, softening his touch and igniting a fire in her veins. His voice is deep and suggestive as he talks about new beginnings. "How do you say?" Here we gave men a little brother and sister, playing with Kara's eyes, opening her eyes wide, and escaping her lip empire. She exclaimed to fly his chest. "The playing men here are just 3 months old, flirting unmatched." "What can I say?" He quipped, his eyes dancing with mischief. "I'm a man of action, and right now, I'm thinking." We should take advantage of this rare moment of peace and quiet." He interrupted himself with a meaningful look at their bed. His intent was obvious, and Kara felt heat rush through her body as she responded to his suggestion with a throb of desire. "You have to strike while the iron is hot." Rykk's smile turned wolfish, and his hands slid down to her ass. "Oh, I'll show you the heat." He growled his voice, a promise of pleasure. Kara laughed low and throaty as Rykk gently placed the minnow back in his crib. He turned to her, eyes full of desire, and took her in his arms, carrying her back to the bed, where they fell onto the sheets, their bodies entwined, and Carrie wondered what twist of fate had brought them to this moment. She had faced the prospect of death, an unfulfilled life, and an unfulfilled future, but now, with their son sleeping peacefully next to her in the next room, Kara knew she already had everything she wanted: a family, a burning love. Commit and be ready for whatever the future holds.